Hello and welcome to the session on installing TensorFlow. My name is Mohan and I'm going to take you through the process of setting up this TensorFlow development environment. As some of you may be aware, it's not that easy to set up the TensorFlow environment. There are several components, there are several possibilities. For example, you can set up on Windows, you can set up on Ubuntu. Now Ubuntu has multiple versions, which version to use, and then you have Python, which release of Python to use, whether to do a pip install, whether to do install using Anaconda, and how do you then link it up with Jupyter Notebook. These are multiple possibilities and it takes up a lot of time to try all of these. So today what I'm going to do is show you a tried and tested method of setting up the TensorFlow environment. And this will help primarily those who are starting with TensorFlow so that they don't have to waste so much time on setting up the environment and experimenting with the installation and setting up of the environment. Now, what we are going to do is I will show you a method by which it is a tried and tested method. And of course, TensorFlow homepage has an install page and it shows you some ways to install, but again the challenge is the same. There are multiple versions, multiple methods shown there, so it's highly confusing for somebody who is new as to decide which path to take. So in today's session what we are going to do is we will set up TensorFlow on Ubuntu, and I'm going to show you in a VirtualBox. But then if you are using a laptop with Ubuntu installed, you can straight away use the same method. However, we need to keep one thing in mind, that the various releases and versions of Ubuntu and Python and then TensorFlow, not all of them are compatible with each other. So these versions and releases need to be very specific. So I will tell you which is the version and releases, what combination is best suited for you to get started, and later on of course you can then experiment with other possibilities and other releases and so on once you get familiar with TensorFlow. To start with, I would also like to mention that it is a good idea to install or start with Ubuntu environment or a Linux, any other Linux also, but here we will focus on Ubuntu rather than Windows. So for those who are already, let's say, using a Windows system, the question may arise, what do we do? But there is an easy option. As you can see, I'm actually using a VirtualBox. So you need to install VirtualBox. Let me just show you. So this is the VirtualBox, Oracle VM VirtualBox, and there are tons of videos on YouTube how to install a VirtualBox and how to create a Ubuntu image. I think we will not spend time on that, but if you're using Windows, and my preference would be to set up a VirtualBox and set up your environment in Ubuntu image. So we will start by assuming that you have an Ubuntu environment, especially release 14.04 LTS. There are multiple Ubuntu versions, and again we will not try to get the latest and the greatest versions or latest and greatest releases, but the focus here is to take the releases and versions which are working and where you will not waste time. So the setup process will be smooth if you stick to these releases. You can of course experiment later on with other versions and try out, but here we will be working with Ubuntu 14.04 LTS, and we will use Python 3.4, and we will use TensorFlow 1.5. This is a tried and tested combination, and I would also recommend that you use the same if you want a smooth start. And so let's get started with that. Let me log in to my Ubuntu system. Okay, so we have the Ubuntu system running here. Now, if you go to tensorflow.org, there is a page which mentions how to install TensorFlow, and as you can see, there are multiple possibilities. You have Ubuntu, you have Windows and Mac OS and so on and so forth. And if you go to Ubuntu, for example, further you will get multiple options, whether you want CPU or GPU, and whether you want to do pip install or using a virtual native pip, virtual env, Anaconda, and so on and so forth. So all these options are very complicated, or rather they're very confusing, I would say, not complicated, depending on whether you're expert or, of course, I am talking about beginners here. But if you click on some of these options, they may look very easy. So for example, if we go back and if you select, for example, native pip, it may appear like, oh, this is just, one single or two steps and that's about it. Everything gets installed. You see here, it should be just one step install. If you say pip3 install TensorFlow and everything gets installed. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So it's not as easy as, so don't get kind of fooled by the simplicity of the documentation here. Again, it's not their fault because of the multiple combinations of releases and so on and so forth. It is not that easy. So what we will do is we will take a slightly roundabout method, which is using Anaconda, which has a few more steps, but you're sure that this is going to work. So that is what we are going to do, and that's what I'm going to show you. So what are the steps involved? Of course, I will not go exactly by what they have mentioned here. As I said, I will show you the steps which are again sure shot to work, whereas here again, if you follow just this document, there will be some variations which they have kind of not documented. So that's the reason I will show you the steps separately. All right, so these are the main 4 steps. You need to download and install Anaconda and then create a virtual environment with Python, and the release, as I mentioned, is Python 3.4, and we will install TensorFlow version 1.5, and then we will install and configure Jupyter, which will be our development environment. All right, so let's get started. This is our Ubuntu, and let's get a terminal started here. And okay, yes, so all right, so we started the terminal, and then what we'll also do is we'll go to the Anaconda website because we need to install Anaconda. We need to download and install Anaconda. So for that, you need to go to the Anaconda website. So you can just open a browser and Google, and you will find the Anaconda website. So this is the site, anaconda.org. Click on this link and it will take you to the Anaconda website. You don't have to sign up or anything like that. Just look for the download Anaconda. So just click on that. It will take you to the download pages, and it automatically recognizes that you're on Ubuntu. So it will show you the links to download. All right. So as you can see, it has recognized that you're on a Linux operating system. So you can just click on this download and it will start the download. There are 2 versions, of course, Python with Python 3.6 and 2.7. I recommend you start with Python 3.6. Now, just want to clarify that we will be actually using Python 3.4. This is just for the initial installation, but subsequently when we set up the virtual environment, you will see there is one more step there where we set up the virtual environment. There we will actually be using Python 3.4, so just that you're not confused. All right, so it has started the download. We just say no thanks for this, and it is downloading. While it is downloading, you can click on this link saying how to install Anaconda. So there are a couple of steps mentioned there that we will be using. So let me just, in the meanwhile, click on this. For some reason, the network is a little slow, so it is taking time. All right, so once the download is done, we will be using the options that are mentioned here. Now the first step, of course, is we are already doing the first step, which is downloading the installer for Linux. The second step is not mandatory, so it's an optional step. Most often you can actually skip that. And third step is what we are going to do. And since we are using, at this point, we are using Python 3.6, we should use this command. So basically, the terminal we have opened here is to use or to run this command. That's the reason I opened this terminal. However, make sure that the download is complete before you run this command. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes and we'll come back once the download is done. All right, so as you can see, the download is done. This is a fairly large file, so if you're on a slow internet or low internet bandwidth, then it might take quite a while. It's about 578 MB, and so this is the file. Now what you need to do is you need to go back to this installation steps, and let me minimize this, and yeah, So this is the command that you need to run. So you can just directly copy and paste this command from here. Okay, so I do a copy, right mouse click. Now it will ask you a bunch of questions as documented here. So most of them you need to just say enter or yes, and that's about it, except for the last step. I will just show you what I mean. And here you need to press enter multiple times just to make sure you agree to all these agreement, the license agreement and so on and so forth. So once you do multiple enters, it will bring you to the next step. Alright, so now here again they say do you accept the terms. You just say yes and then press enter, and here it will ask you a couple of questions, and pretty much you need to just go for the default version, press enter to confirm. You just say press enter, and this is primarily when it will pretty much start the installation process of Anaconda. This might take a little while depending again on your internet speed, so you need to have some patience. We will also probably come back once this installation is done, or if it asks for any further questions. Alright, so here you'll get again one more question. Do you wish the installer to prepend? So you just say yes for this question and keep going. Now the last question, I think we are pretty much at the end, and that is about Microsoft VSS, I guess. Yeah, VS Code. So for this you can just say no, because we will not be using this, and that's it, you're done. So this is completion of installation of Anaconda. So it's always a good idea to exit and start a fresh terminal. Okay, so let's start again, a terminal. So we are done with the installation of Anaconda. The next step is to create a virtual environment with Python 3.4. So for that, this is the command conda create -n, and this is the name of your virtual environment. You can give any name, but for easy reference I have given as TensorFlow, and we have to specify the Python version. As I mentioned earlier, we will be using the combination of Python 3.4 and TensorFlow 1.5. Now this is not the latest version. Python has probably 3.6 at this point at the time of creation of this video, and even TensorFlow probably has the latest version as 1.7, but then these combinations sometimes may not work, and I found that after several trials and errors, 3.4 with 1.5 seems to be most reliable, and that's the reason I have chosen this. I would recommend you to try with this first if you're a beginner, and later on maybe you can try out the other permutations and combinations. Alright, one step I just wanted to show you is before we do the installation or creation of the virtual environment, if you want to just clarify or confirm whether Anaconda has been installed or not, you can run what is known as Anaconda Navigator. So you just say Anaconda Navigator. Okay, we need to edit this part. Hold on one second. I guess it is. Alright, so you see here when you start Anaconda Navigator, this Anaconda Navigator will open up. That is an indication that Anaconda has been installed properly. So that's just a quick check, and you don't have to do anything. Just you can go back and close it once this comes up, and then in the meanwhile let me just open one more terminal for the creation of the virtual environment. And yeah, so this is your Anaconda Navigator, and you can just say okay, don't show me, and you just say okay, and then you can close this. You can say file, you can do a file exit, or you can click on the close button, whichever. Alright, so we will exit from here. We have a terminal open here. We will use this for our next steps. Alright, so what we have to do now is type in this piece of code or this command. For some reason copy paste is not working, so it's a small command, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue. So we say conda and we say create. So this is the command for creating a new environment, /-n, and then we give the name of the environment. So we can give any name. For convenience, I'm just calling it TensorFlow, but you can actually name it anything. And then we need to specify with which version of Python. So we say pip Python, and then that is equal 3.4. Okay, so it will create an environment. This will take a little while. It'll ask you a question, just say yes, and then it will be done. So this is just a warning. You can simply ignore that. And for the question that it asks, you just say yes, and I think you should be good. All right, so it says, do you want to proceed? You say yes, and then enter. This will again take a little time, so we will probably move forward and then come back once this is done. All right, so the environment has been created. Now, it's always a good idea to, whenever some of these steps get over or each step gets over, you just exit the terminal and start afresh with a new terminal. For some reason, sometimes it causes problem if you continue. So I found that it is a safe practice to each time exit the terminal and start afresh. Now that we have an environment created, we can, by the name TensorFlow, you can enter that environment by calling the command source activate TensorFlow, or the name, whatever name you have given. So you'll see here, once you do that, you will get this, the name of the environment will be shown here. So it is like your own, again, a special environment within the system. And from here onwards, you can do other stuff like actually installing TensorFlow and so on. And you will see that it has installed Python 3 here, so 3.4, right? So it is installed. That's what we, during creation of this environment, we wanted Python 3.4, so that is what it is showing. But we are not yet done, so we need to still install TensorFlow. So in this environment, you need to run a command which will actually install the correct combination of TensorFlow. Now this is, as you can see, it's a slightly complicated command, pip install -- ignore install. So what we can do is from within here, we can go and go to TensorFlow install page, and there is a sample code there. You can pick up from there so that you don't have to type in so much. So we say TensorFlow, TensorFlow.org. And I'll also open up probably a notepad here so that we can construct that command and go here. We say Ubuntu. If you come further down, there will be, by the way, we are doing CPU installation. I think that is clear. We are not, there is a possibility to do GPU as well. We will probably create a separate video for that. And if we go here, yeah, so again, you probably, if you follow the entire document out here, it may still not work. So I do not recommend that for now, at least for beginners. But just to copy this command, because this is a fairly complicated command, so this is much easier to copy it from here. That's the reason I'm on this page, and we will then modify it according to yes. Okay, let's say copy, and don't do it directly here because that is probably not yet the right command. Let us go and create a notepad page, empty document. I'll just say tf.txt. Okay, this is just a temporary file. What we need to do here is we need to adjust this command to suit the versions that we are installing here. So let me just explain what it is, what you need to do. So first thing, you can get rid of this one, yes. Okay, now here these parts you can simply ignore. Here you need to go and change it to version 1.5, and I think we are good with that. Okay, so the CP34 indicates your Python 3.4. So later on when you're trying to experiment, and if you want to do other combinations of TensorFlow and Python version, then you can change this. For example, you can change this to 3.6. Both these places you need to change this to 3.6 if you're using with Python 3.6. And similarly, if you want the latest version, which is of TensorFlow, which is 1.7, you need to change this to 1.7 and so on. But at this point, to start with, if you're a beginner, I would recommend that you stick to this TensorFlow 1.5 with Python 3.4. This is tried and tested and it works. Okay, just a word of caution that just by changing these versions, the whole thing will not work. There may be other places where you may have to, some of the steps may change. So just a word of caution that just by changing this, if you want to try out with a different version, some of the steps may also change. So you don't think that just by changing this one particular command you will be fine. Okay, so that's been my experience. So to start with, I would recommend use this particular combination. Alright, so it looks good. TensorFlow 1.5, and let me just reconfirm with my notes, and I think it looks good. So this is install, ignore, 1.5, CP34, and so on. Okay, so let's hit enter. So it started the process. Again, this might take a little while, so we will pause the recording and then get back when the installation is done. Okay, so looks like this installation is done, and as always, let us exit and then come back. Now you are currently in the environment, virtual environment, and it's a good practice before you exit out of the terminal to come out of the virtual environment. So just like you did source activate, you need to do source deactivate and the name TensorFlow. Okay, you will come back to the original command prompt, and then from here you can do an exit. Now we need to validate whether the TensorFlow installation has gone through properly or not. So the way to validate is to first start Python and then import TensorFlow library, see if it imports without error. So that's the best way to validate. So we'll open a terminal, and whenever you want to get into the environment, this is how you have to do. Come to environment and then say source, and obviously you can also use existing. So source activate TensorFlow. Okay, so we do this, and you need to run Python from here. And remember, you should say Python 3 because you have installed Python 3.4. Now here, when you say import TensorFlow as TF, when you get back a prompt like this without any errors, that means TensorFlow installation has been successful. If TensorFlow was not installed properly, you will get an error saying TensorFlow is not available or module doesn't exist or something like that. So TensorFlow installation is done, but now we will go through the process of installing Jupyter Notebook so that you can do your development. So let me just exit, and in order to install your Jupyter Notebook, which is going to be your development environment, we will first install IPython using Conda. So Conda install IPython, and then pip install Jupyter. So let's first do the IPython. Conda install IPython. Again, it will ask you a question saying these are the components. Do you want to install? You just say yes. Alright, you say yes. And then once again, it will take a little while, so we might pause the recording and come back once it is done. Great, so that did not take much time anyways. So we will, as usual, we will exit, which is source deactivate TensorFlow, exit, and then we will start a fresh terminal in order to install Jupyter. Now in some places they may say install Jupyter using pip3, but in my experience it did not work with pip3, and that's the reason we will use pip. However, just keep in mind you need to first go to the environment. So source activate TensorFlow, and you need to use this command, which is pip install Jupyter. Usually when you're on Python 3 you use pip3, but as I said it did not work, so in my experience it works with pip install and not pip3. So pip install Jupyter. I hope you already noticed that it is Jupyper and not Jupi. So again, it's probably taking a little while. We will pause the recording and come back once it is done. Okay, so Jupyter installation is also done. Once again, you need to, it's a good idea, not you need to, but it's a good idea to come out of this terminal session and then start afresh. So we exit and we have a fresh terminal already available here, and we will once again go to TensorFlow and we say Jupyter Notebook. That's how you start your Jupyter Notebook. So this looks good. Now only thing is, since we are running for the first time, what you need to do is, if you come back to your command prompt, it will show you that if you are running it for the first time, it will say that you need to copy paste this link. So you can just, for the first time only once, you need to do this, copy this and paste it in your browser. And remember, this is only the first time when you're running Jupyter. You need to do this. Subsequently you don't have to. It will automatically open up. Alright, so now that we have Jupyter installed and it starts up, we need to test whether TensorFlow is working fine or not. And in order to do that, you can create a new notebook and you say import TensorFlow as TF and shift enter. If everything is fine, TensorFlow is installed properly, you don't get any errors, and then it works fine. This is an indication that TensorFlow got installed successfully, and that's about it. So that's all about installing TensorFlow with Python 3.4. So remember, this is installation of TensorFlow 1.5 with Python 3.4 on Ubuntu. And once again, in case you have a Windows system, in fact I have also done it on a Windows system, you can use VirtualBox to create a virtual environment, Ubuntu environment, and then follow these steps. And there are tons of videos to create VirtualBox, and that's the reason we have not included those steps in this. And if there are any comments, there are better ways to do this, please mention it in the comment section below, or if you need any further help, just mention it, and with your email we will respond to you. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.